England have a problem. And it's a problem that no one really seems to want to talk about for very good reason, because the problem is their best player. It's Harry Kane. Now, the thing is, this video is not going to be a critique of Harry Kane as a player. I think, obviously, he is a very good player because I have eyes and have watched games of football before. So I'm well aware of the fact that Harry Kane is not only just a very good player, but arguably England's best ever player. I mean, you could argue with some other names of the past, of course, like Bobby Charlton or Bobby Moore, or, maybe even recent past as well, like Wayne Rooney or something. But in terms of like just playing for England, you can make a very strong case that Harry Kane is, the best player who has ever played for England. And he obviously has proved that with his goal scoring record. I mean, if you just look at these numbers here of England's all-time top goal scorers, you can see that he's way out in front, right? And I remember growing up and, watching Wayne Rooney break Bobby Charlton's record and that being like a really, really big deal that Rooney had broken his record. Well, I mean, you look at Kane now compared to Rooney, and he's in really his own stratosphere. But I think really that those numbers I've just shown you are a bit of a poisoned chalice for England, because whilst Harry Kane is great at scoring goals and is probably one of the main reasons that, the more modern England teams have done a lot better than maybe the other teams of the 21st century of England, or even just before that as well, I do think that that same thing also then costs them when we get later into tournaments, and I'm going to show you why I think that. Now, it must also be said that what I'm going to bring up today isn't really even Harry Kane's fault. Like, he isn't really in charge of what I think the solution will be, which I'll get to at the end of the video. But essentially, I think, we've had managers with Southgate, if we think of that as kind of the modern England era when they started doing well in some of these tournaments, the Southgate era and Southgate's philosophy, for the most part, kind of necessitated that this was going to happen, right? Because Southgate's main philosophy when he talked about, playing the game, he was very focused on moments, right? That's the idea that, this is a tournament, you've got a small sample size, there isn't, a many games, it's not a full league season or anything, right? And so a lot of games are going to be decided by pretty close margins, right? It's going to come down, you might get 4 or 5 decent chances in a game, and, how many of those can you score? And so, obviously, when you have those moments fall to you, you need your best players to produce in those moments. And we have seen, as we did at this World Cup against Congo, or, you could bring up many examples in the past, of Harry Kane finding that moment, seizing that moment, and scoring a very important goal for England that, like in the DR Congo game, takes them through. However, there is an alternative philosophy that you could have to these tournaments, but it seems like Southgate didn't, and really it seems like Tuchel, who I thought maybe would have more of this philosophy, having been, a league manager and a successful manager, in league football, I thought he might bring this philosophy, which is more of a performance philosophy. Now, what that is more about maximizing performance, right? It's not just decided by moments, that if you think of it of more of a long-term kind of thing, if you play better overall over a long run, you're going to win more games than you're going to lose, right? And seeing it more of a kind of holistic, longer term approach rather than just specifically focusing on, one game or one tournament. Now, what that might mean is that won't always work for a single tournament, right? Like sometimes that isn't always going to work. And also it might bring some criticism if it goes particularly wrong, right? For instance, if you, brought off a player like Harry Kane, and then England lost a game when they needed a goal, you might get a lot of criticism. Why the hell have you brought off the guy who scored 85 goals and, is by far England's all-time leading goal scorer if we need, a goal? The thing is, though, what I'm here to point out is that basically Harry Kane, I think it has been almost proven at this point, simply physically cannot play as many games as is demanded of you to go deep in a tournament or win a tournament. He cannot do it. And there is, I think at this point, ample evidence that that is the case, because we can go back quite some time now to England's exits when they've gone deep in either a Euros or a World Cup and say, for instance, against Italy in 2021, in the 2020 Euros final, Harry Kane didn't have a very good game, right? I mean, FootMob here gave him a 6. if you can remember this game, he basically did absolutely nothing. The same was basically also true in his game against Croatia at the 2018 World Cup, the semi-final. Again, Kane did not have a particularly great game overall. He played the full game, 120 minutes, created one chance and didn't have a shot on target. Now, obviously, in the 2022 World Cup, England got eliminated in the quarterfinals, so this wasn't as deep into the tournament, and you would argue that of the games that England got eliminated in, this was Kane's best performance, and to me, that's no surprise, because it came earlier on in the tournament. Now, FOMO have given Kane a 7.6 here. I think that's personally a little bit high, considering, I mean, if you think about the reason that England lost this game, I mean, Kane missing that penalty did kind of lose them the game. So I personally think a 7.6 for a player that basically did lose you the game is maybe a little bit generous, but he did play a better game, certainly, than he has in others. But again, I think the main reason for that is because it wasn't as deep in the tournament. Because skip on ahead to the 2024 Euros final, and guess what we're looking at? A really bad performance from Harry Kane again. And again, this is just another final where, is it Harry Kane simply can't perform in big moments? I personally, wouldn't say that. You might claim that that's the argument, but I just think it's because he's tired and cannot do it. Because in this tournament as well, by the time that we got to the quarterfinals, and of course we're talking about playing an extra game in this World Cup compared to other tournaments, against Norway, I mean, again, FOMO have given Kane a 6.9 here, but I think that's generous. I don't really think he did very much in this game, right? His XG 0.1. He really wasn't doing that much, I don't think. So again, I think that's pretty generous. And then against Argentina, of course, when England got eliminated, they gave Kane a 6.2. And again, he basically did nothing in all of this game. Now, what's interesting about all of this is I brought up Southgate's philosophy, and I think this is where it starts, that he perhaps felt like he had to keep Kane on the field because he believes in that moment's approach. But what's funny about that is, in Southgate's last tournament, I think he finally realized the truth, which is that Harry Kane can't play that many games in the heat over a summer, every 3 or 4 days or so. He just can't do it by the end of the tournament. And you might remember in the 2024 Euros, who scored the goal to take England through to the final? It wasn't Harry Kane. It was Ollie Watkins. Oh yeah, Watkins came on instead of Kane. And then if you look at that final, you might have noticed Kane got subbed off in the 61st minute, right? And again, he wasn't having a good game, but he brought him off after just an hour. And so I think that by the time we got to the end of Southgate, I think that he realized Harry Kane cannot physically do this. And so I have to bring him off to give us a chance. And this was a manager whose whole philosophy was basically built on moments and keeping on your best players for those moments. Even he realized it, but now that we've gone to Tuchel, it feels like he, hasn't learned that lesson. He hadn't had that lesson yet, and so was keeping Kane on, despite the fact he wasn't really doing anything. And in fact, there is some kind of data to kind of back me up here as well, because we're going to take a look at the average player positions from England from their knockout games. And so if we just go through this, so this is against DR Congo, right? And if you look at England's setup there, you would say, yeah, that looks absolutely fine. We know that Harry Kane likes to drop a bit deeper, right? So we know he's not going to be like Haaland, and just be all the way up here. We're expecting him to drop a bit deeper, but you can see his average position here against Congo. He's still the furthest forward of the central players. We know he likes to come into these areas and, play it out wide. You see the back four looks good. You got Anderson in here, Rice and Bellingham trying to push forward. This is probably what you would want it to look like as England. Then we come to the Mexico game. Obviously, that one's a little bit different because obviously England were down to 10 men for, a decent amount of that game. So obviously that's going to influence this a little bit. So it is a little bit weird, this one. You could see, the wingers are much more pushed back than they are going to be in the other games. Because if we take a look at the Norway game, this is where I think you start to see there's a problem. Because when you get to the Norway game, again, we've still got the wingers, high and wide where we'd want them to be. But you now see that Harry Kane is deeper than both Bellingham and Rice. And you start to see the problem, right? This, to me, represents a player who physically is now starting to struggle, right? This is where you can start to see, I think, this is a player who is struggling. And against Argentina, it's no different, because if I come to that one, it's even worse, because now he's not only behind Rice, Reece James is way ahead of him, and he's not even in the opposition half. This is your centre forward who's not even in the opposition half. And again, we know Harry Kane likes to drop deep and all of that, but it should look like this, right? Again, maybe when you're playing against opposition, you can kind of bring all of these players back a little bit, but still, the overall kind of arcing formation should look something like this. It should not look like this, where your center forward is further back than your right back. And again, this to me is not just Harry Kane coming deep to come and get the ball and pass it about like we know he likes to do. This to me is a player who is dropping deep to do that sometimes, but is also dropping deep, because if England lose the ball, then I'm already in the right position, right? And I don't need to then run back, and I don't need to, I can just kind of walk around a bit, right? The thing is, though, this is not Argentina, right? Our team is not built around, we're going to just have someone who walks around and doesn't do anything, right? And Harry Kane also isn't as good as Messi. So he doesn't get that privilege, right? He's very good, but he's not Messi. And our team isn't built around that. And I think that gives you a pretty clear indication, as do all of the other results from all the other tournaments, that Harry Kane cannot play this many games in that short amount of time in the heat and play well. So what is the solution? Well, as we go forward, this problem is only going to get worse. As I was kind of showing you, even when Harry Kane was in his mid-20s, he was still struggling with it. Now that he's in his early 30s, and as we go forward, we'll be entering his mid-30s, and if we go to the next World Cup, his mid to late 30s, there's just no way. We are going to need to find a different result. Now, will he even play in the next World Cup? I don't know. Right? He probably will play up until the next Euros, I think, particularly because it's the home Euros. But I think the solution has to be obvious. If you are in your third group game and you've already qualified, don't play him. Do not play him. If England are winning a knockout game, and we're 60 or 70 minutes into the game, take him off. Because if we are going to win a tournament, we are going to need to Harry Kane. He is going to need to play well, but he's going to need to play well in a final or a semi-final. That's when we're going to need Harry Kane to play well, which is something that in an English shirt, he's never actually done. So that is when we're going to need him. And to do that, like in this World Cup, for instance, he should not be playing in a third group game against Panama. You should be able to beat Panama without Harry Kane. England have a Harry Kane problem. And Tuchel needs to realize that this is a problem, and he probably needs to find a solution.